And so we took planned operations from some other areas and in consultation, principally supporting combatant commanders. I consulted with those combatant commanders and the Department of Defense and briefed the Secretary on my plans to temporarily change some of those planned deployments. Now, this type of decision is not unprecedented, and we make those tough trade-offs all the time because there's an increasing demand for Coast Guard resources and always a limited number of cutters, boats, aircraft, and crews to provide them. And so that's part of the risk decision that I make in consultation with our area commanders.
Have any personnel, vessels, air assets, or other resources been pulled from the Coast Guard's Arctic strategy to accommodate the southern border surge?
No, Ranking Member Underwood, they have not.
What about your Indo-Pacific mission? Did you reduce lift capacity in the region in favor of more deportation flights here? And are we going to be slower in building our presence there as a result of the surge?
Ranking Member Underwood, there were 2 operational deployments that I directed be changed through that process I described before. And I want to be specific about that. One was a planned patrol working for Indo-Pacific Command, one of our national security cutters, and I consulted with Admiral Paparo about that before making that change. But there's been no change in our permanent presence in the Indo-Pacific.
Welcome back, Patriots, to Right View Nation, where we speak the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it is for the political elites and the bureaucratic empire that runs Washington, D.C. Now, folks, you're going to want to sit down for this one, because what we're about to break down should have every hardworking American fuming. So picture this. The Coast Guard, a vital arm of our homeland defense, is underfunded, overworked, and constantly making sacrifices to stretch every dollar. They're pulling personnel and aircraft from Indo-Pacific operations and even canceling key Arctic meetings, all to surge forces to the southern border because of the absolute disaster this administration created with its open border policies. That alone should be raising eyebrows. But wait, it gets worse. Amid all that sacrifice and budget juggling, the Biden administration decides to slip in a little treat for the upper echelon of the DHS, a brand new $50 million Gulfstream G5 jet. That's right. While junior enlisted Coast Guardsmen can barely afford rent and struggle with access to medical care, the Secretary, who already has access to a Gulfstream, is getting an upgrade. You can't make this stuff up. Let me say this loud and clear. This is how corrupt empires behave, not constitutional republics. While everyday Americans can't afford groceries, this administration is buying luxury jets like we're flush with cash. We're not. And when Admiral Fagan was asked, point blank, if she had been directed by anyone at the Department of Homeland Security or a political appointee in the Biden White House to purchase this new plane, what did she do? She danced. She dodged. She deflected. She did not answer the question. Let that sink in. When asked if this $50 million jet was a political favor, we got a bureaucratic word salad about command and control aircraft and obsolete avionics. Look, we get it. Equipment needs updates. But this wasn't about upgrading a vital fleet. This was about giving a political appointee a flying palace, while telling our coasties to do more with less. And I want to speak directly to the men and women of the Coast Guard right now. You deserve better. You signed up to protect this country, not to serve as a piggy bank for DC elites and their travel preferences. Let's not forget, the Coast Guard is doing the dirty work. They're stopping drug smugglers, pulling people out of hurricane waters, protecting our ports, keeping the Arctic safe, and trying to counter China in the Indo-Pacific. But this administration, instead of doubling down on supporting them, decides to siphon off money for private jets? This is the same government that says we don't have money for a border wall, can't afford to finish the Keystone Pipeline, and tells you to get used to living with less. But somehow, there's always room in the budget for perks for the elite. You want to talk about waste? You want to talk about misplaced priorities? This is it. This is Exhibit A of why Americans are losing faith in their government. Now let's connect the dots here.
Recognizes the gentlelady from Illinois for her questions. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Admiral, thank you for being here today. We know the Coast Guard does an incredible job with what you have, but also remains chronically under-resourced. The Coast Guard does life-saving work to respond to maritime disasters, combat the flow of illegal drugs, counter China, and prevent cyber attacks. I strongly support large increases to your budget, probably even larger than you've requested in some areas. But I'm concerned that this administration's political goals are shifting those limited resources away from strategic theaters where bad actors are aggressively testing American resolve. In your written testimony, you stated that the Coast Guard is, quote, surging operational forces to the U.S.-Mexico border and the Gulf of Mexico. So my question for you is, where specifically are those forces and resources to support them coming from? What theaters and missions were they assigned to before this surge? How many deportation flights has the Coast Guard flown, and why is that the best use of the aviation assets?
Ranking Member Underwood, thanks for your questions and your support. First, to answer your question about the alien expulsion operation flights, to date, since 20 January, the Coast Guard has flown 157 of those flights in support of other Department of Homeland Security components for southern border security operations. As to the other operations where we have surged assets to the southern border, and for us, the southern border also includes the border approaching Florida and our territories in the Caribbean. That's part of the southern border for us as well. And so we took planned operations from some other areas, and in consultation, principally supporting combatant commanders, I consulted with those combatant commanders and the Department of Defense and briefed the Secretary on my plans to temporarily change some of those planned deployments. Now, this type of decision is not unprecedented, and we make those tough trade-offs all the time because there's an increasing demand for Coast Guard resources and always a limited number of cutters, boats, aircraft, and crews to provide them. And so that's part of the risk decision that I make in consultation with our area commanders.
Have any personnel, vessels, air assets, or other resources been pulled from the Coast Guard's Arctic strategy to accommodate the southern border surge?
No, Ranking Member Underwood, they have not.
What about your Indo-Pacific mission? Did you reduce lift capacity in the region in favor of more deportation flights here? And are we going to be slower in building our presence there as a result of the surge?
Ranking Member Underwood, there were 2 operational deployments that I directed be changed through that process I described before. And I want to be specific about that. One was a planned patrol working for Indo-Pacific Command, one of our national security cutters, and I consulted with Admiral Paparo about that before making that change. But there's been no change in our permanent presence in the Indo-Pacific. The other change in the Atlantic, you asked about the Arctic. We had the cutter Calhoun, another national security cutter that was scheduled to support a port visit for a senior leader meeting of the Arctic Coast Guard Forum in Iceland, and we canceled that planned meeting. It wasn't an operational meeting, and so that was related to the Arctic, but I wanted to be specific and clear in my answer.
And what about the Great Lakes, where the Coast Guard plays a critical role in commerce and safety for the community I represent? Has there been any change to the staffing plans for the Great Lakes region?
There have not been changes to that staffing plan. Our presence in the Great Lakes remain as important as always, which includes our domestic icebreaking presence there.
Excellent. In your testimony, you also wrote that you are tripling the number of forward deployed air and surface assets at the southern border and simultaneously seeking total operational control of the region. It's clear strategic trade-offs are being made, and I'm concerned about the impact on your other missions. The Coast Guard desperately needs more funding to meet its mission, and the passage of a reconciliation bill is far from guaranteed at this time. And Coasties, like most Americans, are struggling with the rising cost of living. I speak frequently with young guardsmen and women who struggle to afford housing and access medical care, which is why I was horrified last Friday when we received a last-minute addition to your spend plan for fiscal '25, a new $50 million Gulfstream G5 for Secretary Noem's personal travel coming from the Coast Guard budget. She already has a Gulfstream G5, by the way. This is a new one. And so, Admiral, I have just one question for you here. Have you received any outreach, requests, or any other communication from anyone above you at DHS or any political appointee in the Trump administration regarding a new plane for the Secretary?
Ranking Member Underwood, so first of all, thank you for the support of the committee and the continuing resolution for 25. And as part of that spend plan, to address the needs of our service members and their families, we're able to provide that cover the pay raise for military and civilian personnel, including a targeted pay raise for our junior enlisted personnel, which was essential. You had asked about the military command and control aircraft. So first of all, meeting the needs of our Coast Guard men and women that are doing frontline operations is my top operational priority, and it's a top operational priority of the Secretary. She's been clear with that to me, and I know she testified to that effect before the subcommittee last week. The Coast Guard, like the other military services, operates 2 military long-range command and control aircraft. This is part of our military operational fleet of aircraft. These are C-37 variants. The older one is a C-37 Alpha variant. And like a lot of the rest of our operational aviation fleet and our cutters and our boats and our shore facilities, it's old and it's approaching obsolescence and the end of its service life. The avionics are increasingly obsolete. The communications are increasingly unreliable, and it's in need of recapitalization like much of the rest of the fleet. But this aircraft is necessary to provide the secretary, the deputy secretary, me as the acting commandant, the acting vice, and our 2 area commanders with secure, reliable, on-demand communications and movement to go forward, visit our operating forces conducting the missions, and then come back here to Washington to make sure we can work together to get them what they need.
Mr. Chairman, my time's expired. I just want to note that I didn't hear the Admiral answer the question about whether he was directed to purchase this new Gulfstream 5, and I just want to note that as I conclude my time. Thank you. I yield back.
The chair recognizes Mr. Rutherford for 5 minutes for his questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member.
Why surge the Coast Guard to the southern border? Because this administration blew it. They created a border crisis so overwhelming that even the Coast Guard, which should be focused on maritime missions, has to be called in for damage control. And here's the kicker, it's all political. It's not about security. It's not about priorities. It's about covering up incompetence with taxpayer-funded theatrics and buying off loyalty with luxury jets. And don't think this is just about the Coast Guard. This kind of behavior is spreading like a cancer across all federal agencies. Prioritizing the powerful while ignoring the people. That's the hallmark of broken leadership. And it's up to us, the American people, to say enough. We need to hold every single one of these bureaucrats accountable. If you're a Republican in Congress and you're not grilling these agencies about their spending, what are you even doing there? Because the American people didn't send you to D.C. to rubber stamp wasteful spending and let the swamp continue to swell. We sent you there to fight, to restore order, to defend our Constitution and every taxpayer who's footing the bill. So here's the bottom line. A $50 million jet, while our Coast Guard bleeds for resources, is a slap in the face. It's everything that's wrong with Washington. It's why Trump was right to call out the deep state and demand accountability. And it's why we at Right View Nation will never stop speaking truth to power. Because if we don't fight now, who will? Like, share, subscribe. We don't back down. We double down. This is Right View Nation, where the truth flies higher than any $50 million jet. Stay free, stay loud, and stay American. See you next time, Patriots. God bless.